Tag und willkommen bei Meals and Music. Today I want to show you what you can do with wheat, water, yeast and some other small ingredients. So need some room for this. The second best thing is bread. Now, why do you want to make your own bread, which takes a long time, where you can buy it conveniently at the store? So I have here a store brand of sourdough bread. Looks delicious. It's just like sort of smells weird. And yeah, I don't know. Let's throw that away. But yeah. There's something else to it. I just got from the package the ingredient list of that store brand. Enriched flour, malted barley flour, niacin, reduced iron, thiamine mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid, water is in there, the sugar, of course, sugar, and then some other stuff like yellow corn meal, yeast. We have yeast. Dextrose, inactive dry yeast, calcium sulfate, citric acid, enzyme. Well, I had this golden rule. If you cannot pronounce it, don't eat it. What do we need to make a sourdough bread? Now, before I start explaining that, when you find recipes about bread, most of them are measured in grams, not in ounces, pounds, whatever, something like this. Why is this? Even with American chefs or bakers who are doing that, the reason is that it's so much easier to measure in the metric system. You have a more precise measure. You do not need to recalculate certain things and stuff like that. For example, 1 liter of water is 1,000 grams. So, those kind of conversions are just easier. Now today, it's not a problem to do this because when you buy like a scale, I have that rather fancy scale here, bought it online, but they measure in anything you want to, including grams. So trust me, if you want to do this to calculate something up, so you do not have to add up 1 cup to 6 ounces or something like that, use grams and milliliters. It's much easier. So what do we have? We have 385 grams of bread flour. We have 45 grams of whole wheat flour. We have 270 grams of water. We have 80 grams of a sourdough starter. Now, I'm not going into how to make a sourdough starter. That's another recipe, but you can even actually buy them already done. Then we have 8 grams of salt and an extra 22 grams of water. And that's it. That's all you need. We start with the autolysis process. Autolysis allows the flour to completely hydrate and gluten bonds begin developing and the dough becomes more stretchy, which allows it to expand it later. So therefore, we just take the flours, the bread flour and the whole wheat flour. I need everything. Combine it with the water and nothing else at this point. So just start mixing it all together well so that all the flour becomes moist and can develop. If there's still a little bit of dry flour, you can use your hand. If it's too difficult to use a spatula or a spoon to mix it up, just make sure you have all the dry flour moist and included in that dough. So once it's like mixed up, and you don't have to be too intense mixing it up, just needs to be all like sit together, then you cover it up and let it rest for at least 30 minutes up to an hour. so that all can develop. While the dough is resting in the autolysation process, you can mix the water and the salt. Remember, we had an extra 22 grams of water, and the only reason we separated that in the beginning is because we want to dissolve the salt. When you put salt in the dough, depending on how coarse or fine the salt is, it might not distribute well enough, and then you have like salty pockets. So therefore you take the water and put the salt in there and mix it up here right now and let it stand and mix it again so that it dissolves already. That will help you to distribute the salt better in the dough. Good, the autolysation is processed for 45 minutes now, so we can mix the other ingredients in there. And so we have the sourdough starter. I took this out already. If you use sourdough starter, the best time you can take it out is when it's most active. You know, sourdough starter always rises and falls a little bit, you know, based on the cycles of the development and the fermentation. And when it's on the highest point, right before it comes back, this is the best time because that is when the sourdough starter is most active. So we took our sourdough starter, I pulled this out here a little bit, the dough, and put this in. Sourdough starter. Make sure you get everything in there and don't leave anything behind. And then the dissolved salt water. It's like a little bit salt is still not dissolved, but it doesn't matter. And mix it up a little bit. And at this point in time, the best thing to do is use your hand to mix it better through. You don't have to knead it. Remember, this is a no-knead dough, but it's good to mix it well. So let's give it a couple and mix it well. And you see it's much more moist just with this extra 22 grams of water we put in there. Much more moist than it was before. But I want to make sure it's all really well incorporated here in the dough. And once everything is good together, we put it like in a little ball. So put it together here, cover it up, and now we come into the stretch phase. We need to stretch the dough. For the first time, we wait 15 minutes before we do the first stretch. After the dough was mixed, the fermentation process started. It's the so-called bulk fermentation or the first fermentation. Now, during the fermentation process, which takes a few hours, what we want to do is stretch and fold the dough. Now, why are we doing this? Because when you stretch the dough and fold it over, you give it more strength and the gluten will develop better. And on the other hand, you also distribute the temperature because temperature is critical for the fermentation process. Now, if you have like something sitting on a warm counter and it's a little bit colder on the top or the other way around, that might affect how the whole dough ferments as a whole. So we will do 4 stretches. So the first one is after 15 minutes, which is now. Then a second one after 15 minutes again. Then we wait 30 minutes. And those 3 stretches are pretty intense, good stretches. And then the last one happens after another 30 minutes. And we will be a little bit more careful. Then you should feel already the strength in the dough so that we can go to the next step. Your hands really wet. Grab one end, stretch it, and fold it over. Turn 180 degree and grab the end, stretch it well, fold it over. Now turn it 90 degree. Grab it, stretch it well. Turn it over. And turn another 180 degree. And the last stretch, make sure it stretches out well. Let's shake it a little bit and fold it over. Then lay it down on the seam, shape it, cover it, and wait for the next stretch. Our last stretch will be done a little bit more careful, because at this point in time you will be able to tell already that the dough has more strength and it's not stretching that much anymore as it did before. So I just grab it in the center, put it up a little bit, and then fold it in. And the same, like I turn it once and do 90 degree and do the same thing again. And you see, this is like not stretching that much anymore, just fold it once in half, so to speak. So I make a nice ball out of it, shape it a little bit, and cover it up again. And now we need another 2 hours fermentation before we go to the next process. The first fermentation is finished now. We can take the dough out and shape it a little bit. So I use some flour, put it on my board, and take the dough out. So, and then we'll, with a little bit floury hands, we'll shape it to a ball. So like you turn that a little bit and stuck it under and turn it and stuck it under a little bit like this. So, and then you take this whole ball and put it in a Benetton or proofing basket. Also here needs a little bit of flour so that the dough is not sticking in there too much. And then take the ball, turn it upside down with the seam up, and drop it in. Eventually you want to cover this, and you want to use a piece of saran wrap or some plastic to cover it to preserve the moisture of the dough in there. Because now we're putting it in the refrigerator for the second fermentation. Now this is a so-called retarded fermentation, because in the refrigerator it will go much slower. So we will leave it there for 19 hours and then take it out tomorrow, look at it, and bake it. So the dough was proofing in the proofing basket for 19 hours. So we put some parchment paper down, a little semolina flour, so it's not getting sticky, and put the dough on the parchment paper. Wait a little bit and let it carefully come out. There it is. And then make a nice cut. And put it in the oven. We will bake the bread in a so-called Dutch oven. Now, why is it called a Dutch oven? It was actually invented by an Englishman. However, he needed to use a Dutch process for molding the cast iron, and that's why it's still called today the Dutch oven. Now, technically, however, what I have here in front of me are not Dutch ovens, but French ovens, because Dutch ovens, original Dutch ovens, are made from cast iron only and do not have a coating. Now those parts here with enamel on it are called French ovens. It's not very well known, so if you go in a store and ask for a French oven, they probably look at you, so just go with a Dutch oven, that's fine. So what type do we use? You see this one here, which I use mostly for baking bread, has a lot of burn marks on it because we use it at a very high temperature. So I suggest that you do not use the most expensive and the finest Dutch oven you have or want to purchase for this process, for the baking bread. There are many different brands out there. The probably best known is Le Creuset. However, you have to come up with a few $100s if you buy a Le Creuset Dutch oven in this size. So what I used here, in this case, for example, I bought a Le Walmart, this one here, and a Le Amazon is this one here, oui, oui. So, but I use usually this simple one for baking bread. It works well, and it contains the temperature in there and the moisture. And that's the advantage of using a Dutch oven for this baking process. That is what we will do now. The oven was preheated to 500 degrees, so it's really hot. So I'm taking the parchment paper with the dough in here. Don't touch the pot. And out a little bit and give it a good spray of water. Water is very important so the bread can spring. And close the lid and put it in the oven. There it is. Very nice color. And we're taking it out. Still pretty hot. Turn it over and great sound. That's what it sounds like, a little hollow. And let it cool down for 2 hours. I know you can't resist to eat it, but you need 2 hours. So the bread came out just perfect. It's just like you see these little bubbles, you know, this is all from the fermentation and the sound. Great. So, moment of truth. We need to try it. So let's see how it came out. Always like to start on the end. A lot of people just cut it in half. I just like the end piece. See, you see the pockets in there. It's just perfect how it came up. And smell is really good. I shouldn't talk with a full mouth, but it's delicious. Thank you for watching Meals and Music. I'm Chef Martin, and so I hope you learned something about sourdough bread today. Now I always give like a wine pairing and a music pairing with my recipes. So wine pairing is a little tricky with bread, but there is something perfect, and that is beer. A good German wheat beer. So the taste of the beer through the yeast and stuff like this is really similar and really matches the bread very, very well. So in particular with wheat beer. And by the way, maybe in one of my next shows, I explain to you why Germans who pour a wheat beer always put the bottle down and roll it. There's a very important reason to that. Now in regards of music pairing, there is this Danish group, Laid Back, a Danish duo, Laid Back, and in 1989 they created the song Baker Man. Now, what is better for baking bread than the song Baker Man? I hope you enjoy, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Baking man is baking bread. Baking